Hey everybody, Dustin Schmidt back here again. Today I want to talk about my Canon R5C rig that I'm currently using for interviews. This is a revised rig from one that I posted earlier when I first got the camera. And now that I've had a chance to use it in a bunch of different situations, I think I've figured out a better way to set it up on a tripod for how I use it when I'm doing two camera interviews. So why the R5C still? Well, the R5C is an incredibly versatile camera. If you need it for stills, it's basically an R5, and I shoot a lot of stills with it. But the other thing that's great about it on the video side is that it functions just like a lot of Canon cinema cameras. It has the same menu interface, it has a lot of the same amazing features, but in a really small package. You can shoot 8K RAW, you can shoot 6K RAW in Super 35, you can shoot 4K XFAVC, and so the variety of different formats and codecs and angles of view and lenses with the RF mount, just everything that you can do with it, it's a real Swiss Army knife of a camera. And that's why I really like it as an addition to my kit. Now I've got quite a bit of stuff on here that I rigged out to use it a little bit more effectively for cinema. I've kind of got it rigged out like a traditional cinema camera. So I've got a large VMount battery on the back. I've got a wooden camera C-box here to work as a converter to give me, SDI inputs and outputs. I've got it on a larger base plate here. This is a bright tangerine, quick release, open up base plate. That allows me to put it on a dovetail. I've also got it set up though to easily let me detach the main camera body so that when this breaks down, it does so pretty quickly and in a way that makes sense. And one of the ways that I do that is by having a small rig cage on the camera. I've just got the small rig half cage here, not the full cage. And that fits into another clever little part from small rig, which is this little Arca Swiss clamp to V-mount plate. And this Arca Swiss to V-mount plate folds down really small, but allows you, if you have a V-mount battery that has power delivery, which I do in this FX Lion Nano 3, you could attach that directly to the back of this, and now you've got an easy way to attach V-mount to the camera. Now the way I have it is I actually have the wooden camera C-box attached to that plate. And what that lets me do is this thing can get as big or as small as I need it to be, and it can do it quickly. So what else is great about this camera? Well, it has Timecode for one, which is kind of more of a high-end feature. And I do use the Timecode. I use it with a Tentacle Sync, and I can sync it up with either a Canon C200 or a Red Komodo, and that works fantastic. So another huge benefit and bonus for something that's this small. But there's always been a couple things people have complained about in terms of the way it handles power or the connectivity. And I've got a couple solves for that in the way that I use the camera when I'm taking it out on video jobs. So when it comes to battery life for the R5C, the little LP batteries that it uses are not great for video. They weren't made for that. They were made for stills, and they kind of tried to just make it work when it comes to the video process. But it has a USB-C input that you can use for power delivery. And really that solves a lot of the issues, especially if you're going to be on a tripod for an extended period of time. Now, previously I've used low-cost battery banks that have power delivery, and those work great. And you can rig those up any number of ways. You can hook it up to, I use a Mac to edit on, and you can use the USB-C power cable for your Mac and just set, a USB power delivery battery on the ground and just run a big cable up into the port. And that's a pretty cheap and easy way to provide power to it for hours at a time. But the way I like to use it is to use a V-mount battery, because I have other cinema cameras that use the V-mount battery, and so that kind of standardizes things. So I've got a V-mount battery that has USB-C power delivery on it, and I will hook that up to a V-mount plate that is attached on the back of my camera and run a USB-C cable from the V-mount battery into the USB-C input on my R5C, and again that provides power for hours. So that kind of solves the battery life issue for me when I'm doing interviews, because I can run for 4 hours at a time off one big VMount battery, swap over in between interviews, things like that. It works just like a cinema camera then in that way. Now, the other thing I like to do for connectivity, because the other big complaint is the tiny little HDMI micro port that's on the Canon R5C. And it's not a great port. But if you convert it to something else, then you can run the R5C just like you might any other cinema camera. So I like to use a little part from SmallRig that converts the HDMI micro to a full-size HDMI. It clamps onto the side of the cage, and then you can also clamp the micro HDMI into the port so that you don't get a lot of wiggle there on what is not a very stable connection. So you don't want to ruin that port, but you can clamp it in and then you don't have to mess with it anymore. And then I'll use a full-size HDMI to HDMI and run that into a converter box. Now the converter box that I use is from Wooden Camera, and it'll take a HDMI input and convert it to SDI outputs or HDMI outputs. And when I do that, I'm now able to run the signal out of my Canon R5C to a monitor that takes SDI, just like any other cinema camera. And now the client can get a view out of the R5C just like they can any other camera. And in that way, I can run an A/B cam interview with my R5C and maybe my Red Komodo, for example, run the feeds from both cameras to a client monitor, and everything works great. So that's my revised Canon R5C interview setup. Thanks for taking the time. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.